Our heroes are fading. What does this mean? Every generation comes with stars, superstars, and players that transcend the game completely. And for the first time in 20 years, LeBron James, Steph Curry, or Kevin Durant will not be in the second round of the playoffs. What does this mean? Most of you guys watching this video can't remember a time where any of these players weren't in the second round, and I would bet that a lot of you guys watching this video, this is going to be the first time in your lives in general that at least one of these players is not in the second round. And we were used to these guys being in the finals every year with the Warriors, with LeBron James. Most of these guys made it very far every single season. And for the first time, we are going to see some new blood in the playoffs. Now, this may be sad for some of us. Out of those three players, I'm sure some of you guys watching this video, at least one of them is probably your favorite player of all time. Now, this doesn't mean it's a bad thing though. We are seeing a change in the NBA, and as some greats go out, new greats are going to grace the game and change the way we look at basketball. Before this video starts, the NBA playoffs are starting very soon. With teams making their final pushes before the postseason, make sure you're there to see your favorite team make their playoff push. Is your team already eliminated? Don't worry, plenty of artists are on tour right now, and the MLB season is starting soon. Whatever your choice of entertainment is, SeatGeek has tickets for you, and if you use our code NEXTMANUP, you can get $20 off your first purchase of $20 or more. A pretty good deal in my opinion. Now, I don't see any of those three players that I mentioned before retiring really anytime soon. LeBron is the only guy that may retire in the offseason, but that's probably not going to happen with Bronny coming into the league. I feel like he has 2 more years about. Steph Curry, I still think has a good amount left in his tank. And a guy like him, if he can continue to shoot threes, maybe he's not going to be putting up 25, 30 points a game, but he's a guy that if Steph Curry just becomes a spot-up shooter, he could play for almost as long as he wants to or his body holds up. But like we said, that's just not the way that Steph Curry approaches the game. LeBron James could play for a long time. He could end his career in 5 years, maybe only averaging 10 points. But like he said, he doesn't want to go out like that. Kevin Durant, another guy who has not gotten to a championship, has not won a championship since he left the Warriors, despite having all these good teams around him the past few years. And whether that's bad luck, whether it's karma, some may say, there's a lot going on with these three legends of the game. And I think depending on where you look, a lot of these guys probably in the top 10, I would say top 15 at the very least. LeBron James, arguably the best player of all time. Steph Curry, arguably the best point guard of all time. Kevin Durant, arguably the best scorer of all time. All of these guys, all-time greats. But with that being said, these guys still have a chance within the next few years to go out and perform in the playoffs, but it's not looking great for these teams. The Warriors, specifically talking about them first, their dynasty may be over, and we've said that for a little while now. They came back in 2022, but when we look at this team, the future just doesn't look as great as some other teams in the West. Now, Jordan Poole has been a guy that has been hated on a lot recently after going to the Wizards, but when we look at the Warriors, they were so good because they had Steph Curry, they had Klay, they had Draymond, but Jordan Poole could come off the bench, he could start, he could put up almost 20 points every single game and get that fourth player role. He was going out there and he was having fantastic games, and there was obviously some instances that we saw where he may not have played great, but he was a big factor to getting that team to where it is. Now they do have some young players. Brandon Podziemski, if you guys watched before this season, I pointed him out as one of my favorite rookies in this draft, who I thought was very underrated, so very happy to see him succeed already, but he's not a guy that pushes you towards a championship. Klay Thompson, at this point, what are we getting from Klay Thompson at this point? If he stays with the Warriors, there's a lot of question marks around that. Draymond Green, how much longer does he have playing in the game? I mean, he's a guy that has a lot of wear and tear on his body. He's a guy that has however many fouls at this point in his career. He's been kicked out of so many games. How much longer does Draymond really want to play in the NBA at this point? These guys are getting old, whether we like to say it or not. And the Warriors do have some young talent, like I mentioned before, but when we're looking at other teams in the West, like the Thunder, like the Nuggets, like the Kings. I mean, there's so many other teams right now in the West that just have those young pieces that can push forward. And unless someone goes out there and plays with Steph Curry, a big star, a top 10, top 15 player in the league, I just don't really know if they're going to be able to compete again. Now, the next two are Kevin Durant and LeBron James, and these two players are harder to predict, especially Kevin Durant. As we know, Kevin Durant is definitely not shy to go out and switch teams. Whether you're a fan of that or not, everyone has their different opinion on Kevin Durant at this point in his career. I just hope as his career starts to wrap up, we start to appreciate him a little more as a player. Yes, he may have got those championships easily with the Warriors, but I think there's an argument that he was the best player during that time as he won the Finals MVP both years. But Kevin Durant is one of the most skilled players we've seen in the game throughout its entire history. Like I said before, arguably the greatest scorer of all time in NBA history. He was the guy that really revolutionized the near 7-footer being able to knock down transition threes. And now we're seeing players like Anthony Edwards, who doesn't play like him at all, but he said that Kevin Durant is his favorite player of all time. A guy who just knocked out Kevin Durant in the playoffs. A guy like Victor Wembanyama. If we never saw Kevin Durant go out there and shoot threes like that at a massive frame, would we see guys like Joel Embiid, Karl Anthony Towns? All these guys are centers, yes, but they're bigger guys who kind of have the green light to shoot threes now. And Kevin Durant really was the guy who went out there as a big time player and went out there and got it done. And LeBron James as well. We're not sure if he's going to stay in Los Angeles. I don't think he knows exactly at this point. It really depends on where Bronny gets drafted. I know that narrative, I'm kind of in between at that point. I'm not sure if LeBron's just going to go where Bronny gets drafted. I feel like he said recently that he wants Bronny to kind of have his own career. And if it falls together, if something happens, then it happens. But if not, I don't know, LeBron may be out. He may be trying to reach the championship. He wants to compete in his final years, and I don't blame him. Arguably the best player of all time. Kevin Durant in that same area. He may go out and try to find a team and get on a contender. I mean, we've seen some hints maybe with his recent shoe release and commercial with Chet Holmgren being the star of it. Maybe he's going to go over there to Oklahoma City and get his reunion. I don't think LeBron's going to the Cavs, but I mean, that would be interesting to look at. But either of those guys, they could be out, or maybe they'll just stick with their team throughout the next few years and try to win a championship. But both of those guys are in more interesting spots than a guy like Steph Curry, because I think Curry is the Warriors. He's the guy who revolutionized and brought that franchise back. He is a Warrior for life. Kevin Durant and LeBron James, both guys who have bounced around a few different teams and in their own right can probably just go out and really play on almost any team at this point, depending on where they want to go in free agency. Now, despite these players kind of falling out of their prime at this point, all of them, I would say, arguably past their prime, and some of them may never compete again for a championship throughout the final years of their career. But we are going to see a revolution in the NBA, like we always do. We are at a point where the torch is getting passed. If you guys watched that Timberwolves and Suns series throughout the whole year, throughout his whole career, really, Anthony Edwards has praised Kevin Durant, said he's his favorite player of all time, said that he's the greatest player of all time, and we saw them kind of chirping back and forth throughout that series. And every time Anthony Edwards kind of flexed or made a big shot on KD and was talking to him, KD always smiled, and he said after, it's just how the game goes. And we've seen this before. This is the passing of the torch moment. A guy like Anthony Edwards can carry this league throughout the near future. A guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a guy like Luka Doncic, all of these guys. There are going to be other guys coming up as well throughout the next few years. A guy like Victor Wembanyama. I mean, a guy like Cooper Flagg, who hasn't even played a college minute yet, but is a guy that has unlimited potential in the NBA. These are just a few names. I'm sure there's other names that you guys can let me know down below, but just because we see the end of an era coming doesn't mean that we aren't going to see another one right in front of us right now. And these players are all going to try to compete and become the greatest player of all time. And I know that guys like Anthony Edwards and Luka and Shai all want to go out there and win championships. Victor Wembanyama as well. These guys are going to go out there and they want to pass the greats that they're watching right now and grew up watching. And despite our heroes coming out of their prime, we are going going to see a new generation blossom now, and we're going to see some players change the game just like their players before them. Let me know down below what you guys think. Let me know who your favorite player of all time is in the NBA, and I'll see you guys in the next one.